I was fortunate enough to get invited to the Santa Clarita Sheriff's Foundation yearly community meeting. And in this particular case, this volunteer organization that assists law enforcement and helps them to raise some funds for some of the volunteers, etc., hosted this meeting. The meeting was hosted rather by the sheriffs at the station, and it was attended by over 60 Santa Clarita Valley leaders. That came out of the signal. By the president, the closer the people get to look at what our station personnel does, the more they can appreciate how dedicated they are and to our community. This is a chance for people tonight to go to 6 positions within the station and see the different elements of what keeps the city so safe. And it was really a great, and I was very, very pleased in what I saw. The first part of it was we walked in to start out with dinner. You know, you want to make sure everybody's got a full tummy. But did you realize that there's a memorial garden inside the sheriff's station? If you look at it from the outside, if you look at it from the street, you'll never see it. You'll see a block wall. But on the other side of that block wall tells a different story. There's a memorial garden paying tribute to individuals from our local station who have paid the supreme price for law enforcement, and it was a sobering experience to see it. Then, with a full tummy, we started on our way. We were divided up in groups of 10, and my group started out by walking up to the roof to see the sheriff's helicopter. It's a really nice bird. It happens to be one that I flew in a civilian version of one a few years ago. And but it indicates that they have about 3 hours worth of fuel, and the pilots and the crew of one fly 3-hour shifts, 2 per day. So for 3 hours twice a day, they're airborne. And I would imagine, sitting in that seat and having to pay it. I asked, you guys have any autopilots on board? No. They're flying manually for the whole amount of time. So they support the deputies on the ground. They give them information. Somebody's running. They chase them. And what they told me was that sometimes, if it's necessary, they'll try to divert fire to take it away from the guys that are going on the ground. So I asked the question, you guys got any belly armor in this bird? And the answer is no. So this can't really be a job for someone that's a faint of heart. They've really got to be dedicated. And although it is hard to hit a helicopter, I mean, it has happened. And I give those guys a lot of credit. After that, we went to see the non-lethal and lethal weapons in the parking lot. There's a picture of them. You can see the yellow shotgun. The yellow shotgun is a beanbag shotgun. And I thought it was extremely interesting in discussing when it was appropriate to use that weapon and when it was not. And also there's those little blue things up there are rounds for a newer non-lethal weapon that can be used at a little bit closer range. And they allowed us to handle them, of course, unloaded. But I was a little bit surprised with the newer version and the double-barrel one, how heavy it was. It weighs a considerable amount. And I got my hands for a little bit on their AR-15. I love that sight. That was a really great sight. Really worked great. So the yellow shotgun is with beanbag rounds, and the policy, they told us, was to use it for distances over 30 feet. Because even though it's shooting a beanbag round, if you get too close to it, you can do some pretty bad damage if you hit a person in the wrong place. And so the sheriff's policy is not to be used closer than 30 feet. And, of course, they had the newer non-lethal weapons that could be used at closer range. And they actually demonstrated one of those to us, and the AR-15. But you know what? I was very impressed. Because they, in my mind, they expressed a extreme preference for only using lethal force when their own safety was in jeopardy. That if they don't just not indiscriminately pull out that 9mm and go shooting at people. And they described the techniques that they would use the non-lethal equipment for, and in some cases to purposely shoot at feet first and then torsos before they go up higher. And I don't know if I would be that willing to be concerned with somebody's safety that's running at me with a knife as they are. So here again, I mean, you have to be a special kind of person, and you have to do the kinds of things that a good sheriff deputy would do. And then they provided for one of our guests to fire the non-lethal weapon. By the way, when they did that, they said, how many people have fired a Smith & Wesson revolver before? And we had a whole bunch of people, and they picked one of us. It wasn't me. And they prepared one of our guests to fire a non-lethal weapon. And, I mean, who would have said that any of us couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, right? Well, our marksman missed the target, but hit the building, right? And it wasn't even painted red, but it proves that we can hit the broadside of a barn if necessary. Then we went on to search and rescue. Search and rescue is a team of sworn deputies and volunteers as well to go out on these search and rescue exercises. They have a very comprehensive training program that they discussed. And are you leaving me?
Yeah, I have to leave you. I'm sorry.
Okay, sir.
Fire one, I will see you soon. Promise my wife will be home by 9 as soon as you want.
And read the Gazette this week.
But I love you guys. I'll be here right at meeting. You know that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And so they have a very comprehensive training program. Anybody that's interested in this, contact the Sheriff's Department. And if you want to volunteer or become part of this team, it's a possibility. Then we were off to special weapons and tactics. And it was just a short walk off to the SWAT vehicle. I mean, it looks like the ones you see on television. It's a heavy armored vehicle with a section in the back that has 2 benches in it to transport the people. And the deputy showed us some of the tools they use. He showed us how they would break into a building, or and the different types of body armor they use. That's when I was really surprised to find out that some of the body armor they wear is purchased by the deputy themselves. And yes, sir.
The deputies also get a yearly one-time allowance to purchase items that they need.
I understand that, but this deputy was even talking about going beyond that because some of this stuff is really expensive. So
yeah, I can understand why it would be over.
All right. Well, so he was describing that and of his own situation, and I think rather than a SWAT vehicle, it's really the people, the men and women that get in it and get into harm's way that are really the issue. But we got to see the vehicle. Then we went over to the Mobile Command Center. You might remember when it was unveiled in May of 2015. It was a 34-foot emergency management command center. And if you look inside of it, there's a large conference room. The picture here is not the conference room. It's the section in the back where the communications systems are. And it would bring the emergency team closer to the action. The thing that you guys were talking about that Captain Lewis discussed was the J team. Notice the deputy that's on the, it would be your right-hand side of the picture, and that's how he was dressed. Remember Captain said that they don't dress in a uniform, they dress casually. And they showed us all the different types of drug paraphernalia that they pick up. And it was interesting because this this J team is heavily involved in juvenile drug addiction. And they were talking about that the problem now is down at the grammar school level, that they're starting to pick up kids in grammar school that are hooked on different narcotics. And 2 of the team's activities showed us the different amounts of drug paraphernalia and discussed how some of it was used, including one that it was just kind of blew me away. It was how you make a drug pipe out of an apple. So if you get caught, you can start to eat it, and distract the adult from thinking it's really drug paraphernalia. But they really talked about how concerned they were to get the kids off drugs rather than just warehouse them and throw them in jail. And they also talked about how many times, in some instances, they had to go back and talk to the same kid over and over again. Because many times the kids are not willing to trust or they don't want to get into rehab and get clean. And if they don't, if they're not willing to go into rehab and get clean, a lot of times then later on, what you would consider to be the inevitable happens, and they overdose, and that's the end of the situation. So I was very impressed with these guys. Then we went over to the canine team, and you know I love dogs. Everybody knows me, knows I love dogs. I was waiting. I want to see the canines. I want to see them. But unfortunately, for my group, when we got to the canines, there had been a big drug bust out on, I think it was the 14, and the drug team was out with them. I mean, the canine team was out with them, so we didn't get to see him. And instead, we had a conversation with this young gentleman who is a sheriff's explorer. He was 20 years old. He's been doing this now for 8 years, about what it was like for him to work in a sheriff's station. And he was a very positive kid. So you have to understand that in my career of managing departments, I tend to, whenever someone gives me a demonstration or someone gives me a tour, I tend to be watching on the peripherals. I want to see what's going on that's not on my tour. Because that really tells me a lot more about what's happening. So we know we're getting a new sheriff's station. We know it's going to be a bigger station, a more modern station. But the current station, I noticed, might be old. And it definitely is crowded. But it's very well maintained. It's very clean. And there's no clutter. It says that it's being managed very well. And that is something that comes from the top. Now, all the deputies I witnessed, and I kept my ears open to listen to them talk to each other. I know that I walked into an area that I was supposed to walk in and walk out of. I walked in, I was confused, didn't know where to go, the way they talked to me. But they were very professional and polite, even with each other when you could see them off in the other areas. So this is not just something they were doing for the people on the tour. This is the way they normally are. And even when I saw them, which was not on part of our tour, but I could see out of the corner of my eye down a hallway, when they were bringing in some less than willing guests in chrome bracelets, they were treated pretty well. There was no, it's not like in the movies. I mean, it's very, very different. And so the other thing that I didn't put on this chart is that when I visit organizations, I got to the point where I do this everywhere I go. I walk into a business. I walk in anywhere I go. I look at the employees. And whenever I see the employees all match, whenever they're all one ethnicity, or they all, it tells me something about the person doing the hiring. Because if you hire people if you hire people with the only criteria as whether you can do the job well, you end up with a diverse workforce automatically. You don't have to have some agency telling you what to do. And I noticed also that the sheriff's station workforce was diverse and made up of a lot of different groups of different kinds of people. And I didn't capture, I wish he would have stayed, because I didn't capture the actual quote. But I was also looking around, and I started to see some of the inspirational sayings that were on the different sides of the building. And in this particular case, I went, and since I didn't remember the quote exactly, I went for similar quotes out on the internet from other stations, but they were basically this same type of a quote. The cars we drive may be black and white. That part of the quote was just what it was. However, when it goes on in our job, what goes on in our job is a lot of gray, which means that, you know what, everything is not just absolutely black and white. You have to adjust yourself depending upon the situation and depending upon what happened. And I always believe attitude is everything. And I think that displays the best attitude. So I wrote an article about this trip. That's why I kept saying to him to go read the Gazette. So if you go read the Gazette on that's going to come out this Friday, and in my column, Always Advocating Allen, you're going to see an article that talks about the Santa Clarita Sheriff's Team, our community's six-pointed shining star. And anybody that knows me knows I don't write those kind of things that way lightly. Okay? It has to really be something that I really believe is an organization that's doing the things that we want to see done.